Welcome everyone to the second episode of Written Me. Last time we talked about creating your story concept. Today we're going to be talking about creating your protagonist. We're going to talk about giving your character a purpose, giving your character a past, giving your character motivation, giving your character a goal, giving your character personality, giving your character an arc, and also just getting to know your characters. So, with that said, let's dive in. So the first thing is about giving your character a purpose. Everything in your novel needs to be purposeful. The best way that I've found to make sure that there are no unnecessary characters in your story is giving every character a purpose statement. The purpose statement doesn't have to be super specific, to start with, but it does need to be just something in general that shows you and also is going to help you while writing know why your character is there at all. You can't have a character that's just like, yeah, they exist. Everything in a story should have a purpose, and that starts with your characters, and that starts with a purpose statement. The second thing is give your character a past. A past is what really makes up a person. Every person that you know, every person that exists in real life and just in history has always had a past, something that has formed them and shaping them to who they are at the time that we meet them and get to know them. Your characters are going to lack depth and relatability if they don't have a past. Now, in saying that, don't think that just because you as the author know the past, the reader necessarily does. Obviously, for a lot of side characters, going into their pasts isn't really necessary all of the time. Having a general idea for each character, sort of where they come from and what they're entering into the story with, is actually going to help you a lot writing them, even if you don't actually expose their past to the reader throughout the story. The backstory can often define a character. It can define why they're doing stuff, maybe reasons why they have flaws in themselves, reasons why they have the strengths that they have. It doesn't seem believable if they just come into a story and they're either really evil or really good. There's something that made them that along the way. There's something that they had to choose, and decisions and people that built them up or tore them down along the way to form them on who they are today. It explains to your character, helping understand their motives. We're going to talk next episode about creating your antagonist, but very specifically for your protagonist, that past is very important as well. You look at really famous stories and the past that made them who they are. The whole novel is often, built on what has happened in their past and how that's shaping their current future. Their past also gives them a lot of motivation. Characters' motivations are going to be different based on where they were in their past. Our next thing is you want to give your character motivation. We talked a little bit about this with past and how past can help explain motivation, but this is where you as an author really need to form, especially your protagonist's motivation and where that's coming from. There are a lot of different types of motivation, different things that, depending on your story, the character and where they are at in life, different things are going to motivate them. There are physical needs that often motivate our characters, such as their need for food, their need for water, their need for shelter. Those are very physical needs that will often motivate a character to do a lot of different things. The good example of this is the Hunger Games, that Katniss, especially while she's in the arena, a lot of the things that she's doing is motivated by just her need to survive, her need to find water and food and to get shelter. There's also security needs and safety, so that's very common, especially dystopia, but also a lot of maybe historical fiction if it's set in war times. Safety is a huge motivation for people. A huge motivation in certain types of novel is love and belonging. That's a huge motivation on reasons why people do things, whether for friendships or intimate relationships or family relationships. All of those things are giant motivations. Another one is esteem needs, such as prestige, feeling accomplishment, pride. These things really can motivate often ambitious people. Another motivation is fear. With that is kind of peer pressure. You see it a lot in horror movies. People act rashly and are motivated to do different things when they're afraid. than if they felt safe. Again, this is kind of tied to that need for safety. Guilt and insecurity kind of go hand in hand in a motivation of a character that forms, especially in a lot of adolescent literature. I would say this is present, especially as far as insecurities go. It's present a lot in novels set in high school because those things are very realistic for your character to be dealing with in high school. The last thing we're tackling is giving your character a goal. So your character's goal is often a result of their motivation and desires. So this is very much tied in with the last thing we just talked about. So your character's goal is pretty much going to shape the entirety of your novel. A lot of these things, and not all of them, will shape them in some way, but your character's goal is kind of the story's goal in a lot of ways, especially when talking about the protagonist. Often to find what your character's goal is, ask them what they want. Obviously, you can't really talk to them, but you know what I mean. Figure out, get inside your character's head, what do they want? If the situation that they're in, what are they desiring? What are their needs? What do they want to accomplish? What is their goal by the end of the story? The strength of your character's goal is really dependent on the strength of their motivation. Maybe they want to save a family member from harm. Maybe they want to restore a relationship. That goal, motivated by a very sound and deep and complex motivation, that's going to make the goal more solid and eventually just your entire story. Next up, I think is super fun. It's time to determine your character's personality. They need a personality because personality dictates everything about a person. It dictates the way that they talk. It dictates their strengths. It dictates their weaknesses and their flaws, and their interpretation of the world around them. I know that in the past couple months, at least I've noticed a huge uptick in a lot more discussion about Myers-Briggs and Enneagram type and a lot of personality tests like that. I think that those methods about finding out your own personality are actually a great way to find out your character's personality. You get to find out a person's personality by getting to know them. Spend some time talking to your character. Again, you probably can't actually talk to them unless it's nonfiction and you're writing someone that you actually know. But a lot of times talking to them means just spending time in their head, really getting into what their past is like, who they formed to be. But again, one of the best ways I found to create my own characters is I take personality tests for them. I get on a Myers-Briggs personality type test and I just answer the questions like I think they would. And then I get a Myers-Briggs type that I can read a lot about and get to know that type a lot, which is going to help me understand the character a lot. So again, there's Enneagram, there's Myers-Briggs, there's a test called the Big Six, and a lot of others, if you just search them on the internet, are going to give you a lot of insight into your character that's going to help you form them into a very complex character instead of very flat and very just stereotypical. Also, when we move into writing plot, it's always going to be easier for you to write, your character's decisions and your character's path in their story if you know who they are, you know their personality. Again, just someone who's an introvert and extrovert, those people are going to respond very differently to the same situation. So if you don't know your character, you're not going to know how they're going to respond in your story. So you need to absolutely find a personality for them. Knowing their personality inside and out, especially for your protagonist, who's your main character, who you're spending the most time with, knowing them forward and backward like you know yourself, even better than you know yourself, knowing them like that is going to prevent a lot of flaws in novels, like uncharacteristic speech and action, getting those things out of the way so that your character doesn't do those things because the person writing them really knows who they are. Also, the truth is, knowing your character's personality is going to help you write a plot that's going to be able to manipulate them into revealing sort of their own goals and their own motives. Maybe the same challenges and same struggles won't matter as much to a character who has a type A personality as a type B. Like, you are going to be able to work so much better with your characters and form your story once you know who they are and what they're like. Now it's time, we're moving into giving your character an arc. So that just means the story that they take, the path they take, throughout the story or throughout the process of your novel. And finding your arc is going to be a lot easier once you've already accomplished everything that we've talked about before: motivation, past, personality. The character's arc is kind of going to start to fall into place. Just kind of to define this idea of a character arc, it's an internal journey that your character takes throughout your story. So there are 3 basic types of character arcs, that being a positive character arc, a negative character arc, and a flat character arc. Essentially, the arc is going to be how your characters respond to a situation, whether positively or negatively, and looking at the change within themselves because of how they responded. The person that your character is at the beginning, just by the nature of your novel, is going to be challenged and eventually changed in some way based on those plots of the novel. That's just, if your character doesn't change at all from the beginning to the end of your novel, maybe check your story, because the whole point of a story is looking at a lot of character development. There are such things as plot-driven stories versus character-driven stories, but any time that your character is just flat throughout the whole thing may give a tone of unreliability and weakness to your characters. Talking about sort of a positive character arc, which often is followed by our protagonist, they could face the events in the story and respond positively to those things and grow to overcome struggles. This doesn't mean that they have to actually overcome the main conflict in the novel. If your story is about your characters striving to win a pageant or to cross the ocean, they don't necessarily have to accomplish that goal for them to have overcome struggles and to successfully move through whatever obstacle they were facing. Success for your character's arc doesn't necessarily coincide with success for the events in the story. That's just based on any character, just like any person can grow positively or negatively through success and failure in the real world, so your character's going to do that too. Just the last thing is kind of just other ways to get to know your characters. I mentioned a lot of personality tests before. I'm going to link a few more online resources in the description below, so you can check that out. Some questionnaires, some interviews to talk to your character about. Spending a lot of time with your character is super important. Just like you get to know your friends, you spend a lot of time with them. That's how you know how they're going to react, what they're like, is by spending time with them. So I encourage you all, informing your protagonist to form these things. It's going to look different depending on what your novel is, what your story idea is already kind of formed to be. But the biggest thing is just getting to know them, spending time with them, maybe, writing scenes with them that aren't necessarily in your novel. They could be scenes from their past. Getting to a feel for what their voice sounds like, how they speak. The biggest thing is, you're never done getting to know your characters. That is the end of our second episode for Written Me, so yay. I will be back soon with the third episode talking about forming that antagonist. It's going to look a little bit different than your protagonist because they have a little bit of a different purpose in the story, if you couldn't tell. So thank you all for watching. Keep on writing, and I'll see you all soon.